What's up, everyone? This is Will.
Hey, Will.
What's up, Will?
Good, Will.
Hello.
Hello. Mike,
Hey, Will.
is that you?
Hi. This is Mike.
Great. Hey, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started here in a minute. Let me just mention a couple things to you. Mike's going to kick us off with an opening statement. I'll give it one more second, Mike.
Yeah, give it a minute or so. It sounds like people are still coming in. Give it another minute or so would be great.
All right, happy Tuesday, everyone. This is Will. We're going to go ahead and get started here. We're going to have Mike lead off with the opening statement, and then we're gonna open it up for questions. I have that order that I emailed you guys a little bit ago, and then we'll open it up for general questions. Can I just have everybody mute their lines if they're not asking a question? That'll help with the feedback and kind of keep everything clear and concise for the call. All right. All right. I'll turn it over to you, Mike. Thank you.
Thanks, Will. I appreciate it. First of all, everybody, I'd like to extend my family's thoughts and prayers in a very difficult period of time, both for our country and internationally. I've been moved by several gestures from both my family and our Raider family recently. You know, Mark Davis donated $1 million to the Las Vegas community to fight the coronavirus. Our first-round pick a year ago, Clee Farrell, donated $100,000 to his hometown of Richmond, Virginia, in their eviction diversion program, helping struggling families make ends meet. And then my wife showed me the other day that 4 of our rookies from last year, Alec Ingold, Hunter Renfro, Foster Moreau, and Josh Jacobs, have partnered with 3 Square in Vegas to provide emergency food funds for people that need it. And just this past weekend, my son Michael was involved in feeding 3,500 healthcare workers at 10 area hospitals in Philadelphia. So my wife Mandy and I kind of sat back and wondered why we weren't helping. And so what we'd like to do, my wife and I, we'll be donating $1,000 for each draft pick the Raiders make this year to the Clark County Delivering with Dignity program. It supports vulnerable families in the Las Vegas Valley. The cool thing is that each donation will be made in the name of the individual draft selection made by the Raiders during the 2020 draft. The Delivering with Dignity program assists people who are most at risk for contracting coronavirus. If they leave their homes, benefiting youth who are sheltered in place, the elderly, and those with underlying medical conditions. If you want more information on this program, Will Kiss can provide it after we're done today. But I think it's pretty cool. Tie it into the draft a little bit. We have 7 picks right now, so that's 7,000. If we trade up and lose a couple picks, we'll keep it a minimum of 7,000. And if we trade down and get more picks, it'll go up to whatever it goes up to. So Mandy and I are both very, very excited about it and would appreciate any potential support. Thank you. So having said all that, and it's a lot more than I usually say, let's open it up to questions.
All right. Thanks a lot, Mike. First up, we have Jerry McDonald from the Bay Area News Group.
Hey, Mike, you're about to embark on a virtual draft followed by a virtual off-season program. I'm just curious if you could speak to sort of the challenges of that and whether, you know, such a potentially limited off-season, what kind of effect will that have on the players that you bring in? And are some positions more difficult than others, like, say, quarterback?
Yeah, it's a good question. And, first of all, as far as the draft is concerned, I kind of laugh because everybody's talking about this virtual draft and how high tech it is. If you could see my living room right now, it's the ultimate in low tech. I've got 5 huge whiteboards, and I probably have 1,000 magnets with names on them all over the place. So I kind of feel like I'm sitting in the middle of a 1976 draft room, and it's kind of back to the future. But you're 100% right. As far as the process is concerned in the draft, we've spent a lot of time on Zoom. Our coaches have done an unbelievable job of preparing information to challenge the college player via the Zoom. I don't even know how many we've done so far, but it's been pretty cool spending up to an hour with each of these individual kids and getting to know them that way. So from a draft process, Jerry, we're all doing it the same way. Nobody's got an advantage, and the Raiders are 100% prepared and ready to go, and we're excited about this draft. So I don't think it necessarily hurts anybody. We're all playing by the same rules. I think the harder thing with this draft is the medical side of it. Just trying to verify, especially the guys that had surgery after the new year, what kind of rehab they're having. Are they going to be in time for training camp? And then we get into the whole process of, will there be a training camp? Is there any part of the off-season program that won't be virtual? And, Jerry, I think that's where it really gets tricky. And that's where I'm really happy with Coach Gruden and the coaching staff. And, we're going to start on April 27th so that our rookies can be involved and our draft picks can be involved. And, again, there's going to be a lot of meetings via Zoom or Microsoft Teams or whatever we're going to use for that. We're going to emphasize the installation, the mental side of it. This is where having the right guys in the locker room, Jerry, mean a lot. Who's working out on their own, who's doing what's necessary to stay in shape to the extent that they can. You mentioned the quarterback position. We're very, very appreciative to have Derek Carr. He knows John's offense. He's going into year 3 of it. Marcus Mariota, John and I both know him very, very well. So we feel really good about the quarterback position, and we feel good about the type of kids that we have in our program. The hard part is we've got a big free agency class, and we've got to kind of get them invested and up to speed as soon as possible. And I think that really is the trick right there.
All right, Paul Gutierrez from ESPN.com.
Hey, Mike, I know you said it seems like there's no advantage. Everybody's kind of in the same boat as far as the virtual aspect of things. But given your history as a virtual GM for all 32 teams for the NFL Network, how much more comfortable then are you heading into this virtual draft as the GM of one team? Because you have experience in kind of dealing with this kind of thing anyway, in terms of not having that face-to-face time like you would anyway.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. A virtual GM for 32 teams, huh, Paul? That's I like that. Yeah, that's a fancy way of saying I sat in my living room and watched a lot of film. You know what? I think I think you have 2 decisions to make. You can go one or 2 ways here. When the NFL decreed what was going to happen here, I think you either embrace it and say, this is pretty freaking cool, that we're really just going to watch film and trust who we are as evaluators and trust in who we want in our building. Or you can kind of look at it and say, oh, well, I don't have verified medicals, and I don't have verified 40s, I don't have verified height, weight, speed, and panic about it. And I think we've kind of, as a team, as a building, we've collectively said we're going to embrace it. And to be honest with you, for me personally, Paul, part of it is kind of what I've done for the last 20 years. It truly is. I feel very comfortable sitting at my dining room, crunching tape, calling college coaches, and looking to get any advantage and any information I can on every guy we're interested in. So it's a really good question. And to be honest with you, we're just, as a group, we're embracing it. I think it's been a great process.
Okay, next up is Vinny from Las Vegas Review-Journal.
Hey, Mike. You guys are pretty active in free agency, checking off some boxes, especially defensively. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about what you guys were able to do specifically at linebacker Also, how did Rod Marinelli fit into that, especially with your defensive line acquisitions? And do you feel like you've put yourself in a pretty strong position being now transitioning to the draft?
Yeah, Vinny, I think what we've been able to do is spread around the money a little bit in free agency to plug some holes, especially on the defensive side of the ball that needed to be plugged. And we've done it with guys that are both young and have a consistent amount of playing ability, and a lot of them have been starters. So, you talk about the linebackers. Corey Littleton covers as well as anybody in the league. We feel like Kwiatkowski will wear the green dot and fit in seamlessly with what we do. Carl Nassib plays just like Farrell and Crosby. He's 6'6", 275. We'll get off the bus with three long, powerful, tough defensive ends. He'll fit right in. And Malik Collins, Rod obviously coached him last year, and Rod jumped up on the table in support of what this kid can be. And the cool thing about it is, and a couple of them may have had birthdays, I think all of them are 26 years old right now. So we got 4 potential starters. All of them are plus or minus 26 years old. And it really enhances who we are in our defensive front. And then on the back end, we get Jeff Heath, who started an awful lot of football games for the Cowboys, and Demarius Randall, who, when he came out of Arizona State, I thought he was the number 1 free safety in that draft. So, again, we got another young player in Randall. We got Heath, some experience. And I think what it does is it allows us to go into the draft on the defensive side of the ball and just kind of say, okay, where's the best football player? Let's go get him.
Thank you, Scott Bear from NBC Sports Bay Area.
Hey, Mike. It was on the NFL draft's third day last year where you were able to pick up a number of instant impact players. Was there anything from that day or any particular pick that really stands out to you in terms of getting Crosby or Hunter or Foster? Anything that really stands out from that day?
Scott, I'll tell you what stands out is just kind of learning a lesson, and it's not an easy one, especially in your first draft, and that is just having to be patient and the power of patience. And we had talked about moving up a couple different times throughout the first 2 or 3 rounds. We talked it through. We decided not to do it. And, we got in the second round. We traded back twice and still got the one player we wanted, Trayvon Mullen. It gave us some extra picks on the third day. We traded back 2 times again in the fourth round, and then traded up in the fifth round to come get Hunter Renfrow. So I think the one thing I learned is that even though I wanted to be impulsive, I think that it helped that John and I talked everything through and kind of decided to be patient. And ultimately, we let the draft come to us a little bit. And through that process, we generated 2 or 3 extra picks that turned into pretty good football players. So, obviously, you want to be aggressive, and you want to go after the players you want. But in hindsight, on the third day, you get Max Crosby at 106. We think Isaiah Johnson, who's a 4th-round pick, has a chance to be very good. Foster Moreau had a heck of a season as a rookie till he got hurt. And Hunter Renfrow, as a 5th-round pick, had a big year in a slot. So, I think a lot of people get fired up, and the mock drafts are all about the first round, and, people scream and yell about who the quarterbacks are. But at the end of the day, to me, the third day is just as important as the first, and so is the acquisition of the college free agents.
All right, Vic Tabor from The Athletic.
Hey, Mike, I'm going to get back to the quarterback situation. Why is Marcus Mariota a good fit, and how do you see the QB room as a whole right now?
I think the cool thing with my background and John's background is a lot of things we said and did in our past are public. So if you're Marcus Mariota and you want to know what the general manager of the Raiders thought about him before he came out, or what John Gruden thought about him before he came out, all he's got to do is go back and check public records. I mean, he went through Gruden's quarterback camp on television. I had him as a top quarterback in that draft. He knows that both of us believed in him coming out and still believe in him. He's got to get healthy. We've got to rebuild him a little bit, just get his confidence back, build him up from the ground up. It's going to take a little while, I think, just to get him healthy and where he wants to be. But we're excited about the quarterback room. And, I thought Marcus did a great job with the first couple interviews he had, just talking about where he was, which is he wants to support Derek. He wants to become the best version of Marcus Mariota that he can become. And that's the way we look at it. Let's see who the best Marcus Mariota is. And in the meantime, we love what we have with Derek Carr. So we're real happy with our quarterback room. We've got Nate Peterman, who played well till he was hurt. Deshaun Kaiser, a former second-round pick. So we feel like we've got a very strong quarterback room.
Okay, Ed Graney from the Las Vegas Review-Journal.
Hey, Mike, you talked about panic compared to people who really think they're locked in and research, but some have surmised maybe if the research isn't what it was in the past, pro days, meeting guys face-to-face, that teams might be willing to come off more on these first-round picks than they have in the past and trade down if they're not completely sure, or if you're locked in, you'll take the pick. Do you think this break will make that first round even more erratic, or do you think it'll be kind of like the same as it's always been?
I think the bigger change comes on the third day and thereafter, because the first day prospects, for the most part, you've got 2 to 3 years of film. Most of them at least were at the combine, and you have at least a height and weight, if not verified 40 times, et cetera. So for the bigger name guys, there are less question marks, with the one exception of medical. And that's the one, again, where I think most teams have the most concern. If we don't know as well as we have in year past with combine rechecks and medical, and there's always been a consistency of how that was performed. So I think the biggest issue early on is just the medical status of a lot of these guys. But outside of that, if you don't know these first-round guys, I mean, there's plenty of tape, plenty of opportunity to get on Zoom with them. I think it's more kind of that third day when you start talking about guys that don't have as much tape, guys that don't have verified, guys that were not at the combine. We're getting an awful lot of tape and information from agents that are doing ad hoc pro days, and how much of that can you trust or not trust. So I think more of the question marks begin to surface the further you get into this draft. I think the first round, for the most part, will be similar to most years.
Thanks.
Thank you, Ed.
Eddie Pasco from Raiders.com.
Hey, Mike. You and Coach Gruden were so nimble throughout the draft last year, trading and moving around, especially later in the draft. Do you think that given the constraints this year in terms of who's allowed to be where, do you think that'll have any impact on if you guys are able to do that if you so choose?
I hope there's no impact, Eddie. I've got to spend some time later this week once we get all our telecommunication stuff set up. And I basically have to figure out, and I'm about 100 years old, so I've got to sit here and figure out how to screen share and have 4 different people on one screen and make sure I understand, if there are multiple trades going on at the same time, how we're handling it, how we're communicating, are we texting, can I see anything visually? So really the challenge for me, because I'm not very good at that kind of stuff, it's a lot easier when somebody's sitting across from me and passing me a note saying, hey, Atlanta wants to talk to you while I'm on the phone with Detroit. So I'm anxious to, and I'm kind of old school in the sense that I think if you practice enough at anything, you can get good at it. So I'm anxious to get the communication stuff into my house. I'm anxious to get everybody around the country that I need to communicate with together. And I got to start practicing because I'll be the first to tell you I'm clueless when it comes to sharing a screen.
Josh Dubow from the Associated Press.
Hey, Mike, you talked about the additions you made on defense. The one spot you guys weren't able to do much on was at cornerback. Where do you see that spot on the roster now? And is that something that you're hoping you'll be able to address next week in the draft?
Well, where we are today is we feel like we've got a bunch of talented young kids that we don't know enough about yet. Trayvon played really well the second half of the season. We believe that he's going to be a starter for years to come. Isaiah Johnson was a fourth-round pick, former wide receiver with all kinds of physical skill set. We love his traits. He got hurt early. We brought him back late. He's a guy we can't wait to see play. Keyshawn Nixon was a free agent out of South Carolina that made the team and played well on special teams. He's a really competitive young man. And Dylan Mabin is another kid out of Fordham who got hurt and didn't get a chance to show what he could do. So we've got 4 or 5 young corners who we're kind of intrigued by. Now, do we think we need to get better there? Yeah. But you always have to be careful to see how the board falls. I think the biggest mistakes people make is trying to reach for need. So the board will fall whatever way it falls, and if we're fortunate enough to get a corner, that'd be great.
All right, one more before we open it up to everybody else. MJ Acosta from NFL Network.
Hi, Mike. You mentioned in the combine and over several months that there are needs to fill sort of all over the roster, but one glaring one was certainly at the wide receiver position. With the amount of talent that there is at wideout in this year's draft, is that a position that you could possibly take a closer look at compared to others?
Well, I think wideout this year is pretty cool. And the comment I made at the combine was in a typical year, and the average is 12 to 13 wide receivers typically get drafted in the first 3 rounds of the draft over the last 5 years. And I think you could have plus or minus 20 of them that are graded that way. I'm not saying they'll go that way, but they're certainly graded that way. So there are a bunch of guys at the top end of the draft that are considered first round. There are going to be guys in the 4th round that typically would go in the 3rd round or earlier. So there's quality at the top. There's depth throughout. There's no secret that we need to get better at wideout. We understand that. We really like adding Nelson Aguilar, but we still need to get better at wideout. And again, it's kind of like the corner conversation. I think you got to let it come to you a little bit. And whether it's in the 1st round, 2nd round, 3rd round, 5th round, I'm hoping we can find a wideout that fits what the Raiders need and fits our culture.
Okay, thanks, everyone. We got about 5 more minutes left with Mike. So if there's anybody with some outstanding questions, just speak up and try to be respectful of one another, and we'll try to get it all in.
Hey, Mike.
This is Tashawn Reed from The Athletic. Hey, Mike. I just want to ask, how do you go about the process of determining positions where you may not need a starter, but you can benefit from drafting players who can provide some competitive depth later on?
Yeah, I think that got a little bit convoluted, but I think you're talking about how do you go about looking for not necessarily starters, but depth positions. Somebody's
right.
Got their if you guys could turn it on mute, it would really help because I'm getting some really bad feedback now. Thank you. So as far as the whole depth conversation, it's a good one. And I think it starts with, where are you salary cap? Where are you when you look on your own roster a year or 2 down the road? Where are positions where players are getting older and making a lot of money? And at some point, where can you bring in a younger guy that may not necessarily start year 1, but by year 2 or 3 begins to infill for the aging veteran that might be making a lot of money? And I think that's the reality of our league. That's the reality of managing a salary cap. And I think while we're all looking for starters, let's face it, we're also looking for guys that need a year or 2 to develop and ultimately could fit into a role for a team.
Hey, Mike, this is Vinny again. When you look at the 3 top wide receivers that most people have at the top of their particular boards, 3 dynamic players, but they're very unique compared to each other. There's like different things that each of them do compared to each other. How much of that evaluation becomes, type of the scheme that you guys are running and how each of those type of players would fit into your system as opposed to just who's the better player necessarily?
Well, I'm not sure which 3 you think are the best or which compared to which 3 I think are the best.
Well, I would just say Jerry Jeudy, CeeDee Lamb, and Henry Ruggs, just as that seems to be the consensus top 3.
And the question is again, what is it fit?
They
for
seem
our
to be,
system?
yeah. They seem to be different from each other. Like they're all 3 obviously good players, but they do things maybe 3 different ways, at least perception wise. So when you look at their skill sets individually, how much of that becomes the fit in your scheme that you guys are doing when you evaluate those three players?
Yeah, I think that's fair at every position, and that's a conversation John and I have all the time. Is fit? What is the right fit? And a guy could be a dynamic player at any position, and you look at him and you say, but does he fit what we're looking for at this position? And I think you're right. I think the three guys you mentioned all have different traits. I think they're all high-level players. There's a whole bunch of wideouts, and I think that's one of the things I said in December also, is that there's all kinds of flavors and sizes. And, if you need a big X, there's a bunch of big X receivers out there. Do you need a guy that can play slot NZ? Yes, check. There's a bunch of them. Are you looking for a wide receiver number one? There could be a wide receiver number one in the third round. And again, to your point, yeah, fit's really important. I think the cool thing, though, about John's offense is, and I think what he showed last year, especially with what we did with our tight ends, John's adaptable to whomever he has. And that's the cool thing. And that's been the kind of fun thing to talk to him about the wide receivers about. What does this guy do for us? Versus what does that guy do for us? John, what do you think is the best fit? We've had some great conversations about it, and I'm sure we will continue to do so right up till the draft.
Hey, Mike, you told us last year, I think on this call, that you have always been fond of picks 20 through 60. And right now you go from 19 to 80. Would you be surprised if when the draft is over that you didn't pick somebody from 20 through 60?
I guess all my words come back to me in shades of mediocrity, huh? I do like picks 20 through 60. What's intriguing about our picks this year, obviously, is I'm very thankful to have 2 first-round picks, but we have 3 in the third. And again, to me, 3 picks in the third is just like stealing. They ought to, if we're doing our jobs the right way, hopefully that's 3 more starters. Could we move up to get one? Could we move back to get one between 20 and 60? Sure. And again, we're running through every possible scenario that we could that we could be looking at, and we won't know till draft night or day 2 or whatever. But I think we're always open to something that makes sense for the Raiders. And would I love to be 20 to 60? Would we love to be 20 to 60? Sure. But we also love 12, 19, 80, 81, 82, 121, and 159. So it's all going to depend on what happens while we're on the clock and during the draft.
Hey, Mike.
Thank you.
Any more questions for Mike, guys?
Hey, Mike, Chris Matthews, KLS, really quickly. They were going to introduce the Las Vegas Raiders merchandise on that opening day. Have you heard? Are the players getting caps? Are you guys sending out merchandise of these potential picks, and they're going to throw on Las Vegas gear? Or have you heard anything?
Chris, you asked the wrong guy, man. I have no idea about merchandise. I have no idea. I mean, I got enough problems trying to figure out who to take at 12. So you're going to have to talk to Will about that one, okay?
All right.
Thank you.
Mike, what's the
Mike,
process for the guys who were ended the year injured, and guys like Foster Moreau and some others who were in their rehab? How much contact are you guys able to have with them, and what's that process like?
I'm sorry. All I heard was Foster Moreau.
Guys who ended the year injured and are rehabbing, like Foster. Yeah. What's the process of contact with those guys, and what's the status of some of those guys?
Yeah, our medical people are allowed to talk to them, which they do. Foster's doing really well. He's been in Baton Rouge. Obviously, he's an LSU guy, and he's been rehabbing there at LSU. He's ahead of schedule. If you know the kind of kid that Foster Moreau is, he's working his tail off, and if anybody can come back and be ready for training camp coming off that ACL, it's going to be Foster. He's done great.
Hey, Mike, I want to ask you about the signing of Jason Witten. Is it fair to say that wasn't really an area of need?
Here's the way I look at it, and I think John and I looked at it the same way. If there's a Mount Rushmore of NFL tight ends, he's on it. And I know he's 37 years old, and I know we have a pretty good tight end room. But when you talk about bringing in a guy like him, not only can he still play, I think he had over 60 catches. He'll block the backside C gap. He's still a competitive football player. But on top of that, he brings this wealth of knowledge about how to be a professional. And you guys get tired of me talking about foundation players last year and the locker room and culture. And that's who this guy is. He's the quintessential culture guy. And we plug him in our locker room, and we've got one more veteran that can look around the room and tell people with all his experience what to do and what not to do, show people what to do and what not to do. And even more importantly, in the tight end room, you get a guy like Foster coming off an ACL. Hopefully he's going to be 100% day one. But if he's not, we've got a conventional wide that can play. Plus, we've got a guy in that tight end room that I think is going to help the young guys. And I'm talking about all of them, Darren, Foster, Dirk. I mean, John and I looked at this we're joined at the hip on this decision with Jason Witten. We just thought it was too good an opportunity, both for our locker room and for our tight end room. And by the way, the guy can still play a little bit.
More for Mike. Anybody want one more?
Hey, Mike, it's
yeah.
Got there. I was curious when it came to signing Demarius Randall. Is he going to be a safety for you, or given his experience at outside corner, could that be an option? Where do you see him fitting in?
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things when he came out of college where he had kind of that corner free safety versatility. Day one, he'll be a free safety, and he'll be competing for the opportunity to play with John Abram and those other guys on the back end. We love the fact that he can drop down and cover a slot man-to-man. But initially, we'd like to see him at free safety, and I think that's his best position.
Great. Well, thank you, Mike. Everyone, I emailed you a link to Delivering with Dignity. If you have any follow-up questions on that, feel free to contact me. Other than that, we'll be in touch soon. Thanks, everyone.
Hey, Will?
Yeah.
There'll be a transcript, yeah?
Yeah, we're sending out a transcript, yep.
Awesome. Thanks, man. I appreciate it.
All right,
Thanks, Will.
Thanks.
Thanks, Will.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Will.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, Will.
Thanks, guys.